We've made a map that shows two canals. I'm sorry you can't look at it because you're having to sort these. We'll just push them on one side. This has got to be geographically correct as to contours. So we have two. There's one here. We'll try and take these off. This is the Eight-Rise Canal. Now you see with two kinds of material here. One is a drawing to scale of two Eight-Rise canals. One disused and never quite completed, and the new one that is in use with all the lock mechanisms and so on. This one shows us the position of the Eight-Rise. You can see the one that wasn't ever finished because there's no water flowing down it. Inkstone Bottoms is a correct name for the period that has come from an Anglo-Saxon time, you see. So here we have, for some reason, two canals which are not explained. We don't know what they'd see when they start looking at this, but it is not negotiable. There are 8, and there's 2. I mean 8 rise and 2. The water is correct, the roads are correct. There's the minimum of information. The blue is hardly indicative of a lot of water, but it is if you look carefully. But now over here, you see, we have a much more detailed map. Can we just lift this over? Now we can see where Inkstone is. And we can see, I think that says to Inkstone Bottoms, but I may be wrong.
To Harston, they said.
Ah, yes. I thought it said to Inkstone Bottoms somewhere.
There's
maybe I'm
Inkstone
wrong.
there.
Yes. I thought there was an... Here we are. There's Inkstone Bottoms, which locates us close to the canal. We also have a ley line because of what we want to put into this. Now, we've invented a whole situation that will, A, look at transport in the 18th century and life. The early 19th and late 18th century, and life at the time. So we've created canals because where there are canals there are lock keepers. We've created a geographical site because the geography people are very interested in this one. So you'll see that the contours are marked. We've put in a ley line because it's a bit of a mystery. But we think some people might just be interested to ponder on because it is related with geography, even though it's in that mysterious area. You can't see a ley line, and yet you know there seems to be a relationship between this church here and sight lines and so on. So we've put the ley line in. We also added that in this village they were very interested in research into windmills. There's a fair number of high points and alternative power things because we wanted the children to look at this. Houses are being built without chimneys now. How long will North Sea gas last? What is going on about alternative systems of power? So the upper classes, the upper high class, the age classes in the school, the upper classes in the school, the older students in the school were going to quite seriously become the inventors almost of research methods into windmills and so on. And so we deliberately planted that in, alternative power. We based it on a village in Wales, which is dedicated to that. But we also, in order to introduce the period element, we took a genuine account of John Broad, who worked on the canals. He was a famous designer of canals. So we thought we'd better have the best we can get. But then, you see, and you can see the difference, we didn't want the children to be confused that this account is genuine like that one is. So we hand wrote this, and of course the original is in the form of a book, the diary. It's the story of the tragedy of why the Eight-Rise was never finished. If I just read you John Broad began his working life at the age of 8 as a beater. So we're seeing how people move from one job to another. And when the canals came, he began to work as a carter with the canals. We've put pictures in to avoid explaining what it was like in 1834. I mean, the originals look better than these photocopies. And then we have in the summer of 1835, and you see, with information planted, the Steam Navigation Company. We've got wooden planks to shore up the side. They're all keys that we've been talking about earlier. And we know on the 8th day of rain, the engineer having ordered that building which had been suspended should recommence at noon. John Broad harnessed his mare Nell, there's a load of information, to the cart with the last load of shoring timbers, and began the long haul from Ingston Bottoms. And then you see at the 6th rise, the rain had washed away the temporary gravel footpath. Temporary gravel footpath is part of the building of a canal. Later, it will be the footpath that the horses walk to pull the barges. I mean, the amount of material put into these few sheets is enormous to avoid the teacher saying, oh, well, you know. And then you see, by this time the men were angry. They could see the terrified horse was deeply in the mud and the wheels embedded. John had to pull and cajole her while the other men pushed and beat her from behind. Nell whinnied with fear as she strained in the shafts and broke free of the mud as the cart, and I don't know where the next bit is, but when his wife brought his dinner, it was to find her husband's body at the side of the canal. Now you see, that sort of information would provide the absolute basis for village life. His dinner is mentioned, the food is mentioned, how she carried it is mentioned, but very briefly. Now you see, you can give children a book like that and say, read this story, it's very interesting, about the canals, and then you'll know how bad the accidents were. Well, will you? Will you? Is that what you want to do in school? It's a nice story. I mean, well, it's a horrid story. But what you want is whenever they see a canal, they see who paid. When they see monks, they don't just laugh. When they see old houses and say, oh, it's Tudor, they have some images. They're educated. And we can't educate them in everything. But even one project like that enables children to realize that whatever you look at, you can look into. And they have all their lives to look into things. But if they're taught in school, get through it fast, finish it before the bell goes, hand it to me, you'll get it back. Nobody is learning anything of the kind we are talking about. And one of the pains, I think, is can you risk a lot on one throw and do it well to plant in future skill? Because that's what this is about. You decide you'll narrow the field to study the depth. You won't run the whole procedure with no memory of anything. we know that the canal yielded a horse, you know. In our case, we lost a horse. But it wasn't many months later that on Radio 4 there was a horse found, the skeleton of a horse and the shafts of a cart. A kid rang me up that day, and it was a long-distance call to say they found a horse like Nell in the canal. Now that's what I call dimension, you see.